history, a diplomatic earthquake has just shaken Washington. At a global summit in Malaysia, America's leadership was left stunned. Good evening. We interrupt this broadcast with urgent news regarding the situation in Ottawa, where lawmakers are currently responding to a major security breach.
The world just witnessed something that'll echo through history books for generations. The day Canada stopped being America's polite neighbor and became the power that made Washington blink. You're watching this right now because what happened at that press conference in Malaysia wasn't just diplomacy. It was a surgical dismantling of everything Donald Trump thought he controlled. And the man who did it, he didn't even raise his voice. Picture this. Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, the ASEAN Summit. Cameras everywhere, flashing like a lightning storm. Journalists packed the room, some from Tokyo, others from London. A few even flew in from Sao Paulo. Everyone wanted the same thing, to see if Canada's new prime minister would crack under pressure or finally push back. Trump had just finished throwing a fit on Air Force One. Trade talks with Canada? Done. Finished. Over. That's what he told the press anyway. Why? Because Ontario Premier Doug Ford aired a commercial in the United States. Not an attack ad. Not propaganda. Just Ronald Reagan's own words warning Americans about the dangers of tariffs. That one 30-second clip sent Trump spiraling into a full-blown rage. He slapped another 10% tariff on Canadian goods, called Canada disrespectful, and basically threw the economic equivalent of a temper tantrum. Everyone expected Carney to fire back, to defend Canada's honor with some fiery speech, but when the reporter asked him about Trump's outburst, Carney just smiled. A slight, almost imperceptible smile. And then he said it. We're adults here. When America wants to behave like grown-ups, then we'll deal with it. The room went silent for half a second. Then the cameras exploded. That single sentence ripped through social media like wildfire. Headlines screamed about Canada's diplomatic knockout. Commentators called it the moment Trump met his match. But here's what most people missed. This wasn't just a clever comeback. This was Carney sending a message to every investor, every CEO, every world leader watching. Canada was done playing defense. The chaos of Trump's America would no longer dictate Ottawa's future. And behind that calm, calculated answer, a storm was building that would reshape North American power forever. Let's rewind for a second. How did we even get here? It started with Doug Ford's genius move. His government produced this slick commercial and aired it across American TV networks. No flashy graphics, no dramatic music. Just footage of Ronald Reagan from the 1980s standing at a podium, warning Americans that tariffs destroy jobs and hurt the economy. That's it. Reagan's own words. The Republican icon. The man conservatives worship like a saint. But to Trump, this was a personal insult. Reagan openly contradicting everything Trump's tariff crusade stood for. Within hours, the White House exploded. Trump tweeted furiously. His advisors scrambled to contain the damage, and he doubled down on his threats against Canada. Then Doug Ford went on CNN, and this is where it gets beautiful. The host asked if the ad had gone too far. Ford leaned back, grinned, and said, "If Reagan's words trigger your man-baby president, that's your problem." Brutal, bold, absolutely viral. The clip spread across TikTok, X, Instagram, everywhere. Americans suddenly saw a Canadian leader defending their own economic sanity using their own hero's legacy. Trump's fragile image cracked wide open on live television. But while Ford grabbed the headlines with his knockout punches, Carney was playing a completely different game. He didn't react emotionally. He didn't chase the argument. He let Trump's fury burn itself out while he built something far more dangerous. An alternative. A Canada that didn't need America at all. When journalists asked Carney if he'd spoken with Trump, his answer was one word. No. That single syllable carried more weight than any speech. Then he explained calmly, deliberately, like a surgeon making precise cuts. We stand ready to sit down when the United States is ready to behave like adults. Every word was crafted to contrast Trump's chaos with Canada's composure. He mentioned progress on steel, aluminum, energy. He listed all the work Canada had done while Trump was busy tweeting insults. And then, almost casually, he dropped the real bomb. We're going to focus on building our economy with generational investments. Those words weren't aimed at the White House. They were aimed at Tokyo, Berlin, Singapore, London, at every investor watching this mess unfold. Carney was telling the world, Canada is stable, America is not. Choose wisely. Global markets noticed immediately. Financial analysts from Asia to Europe started describing Canada as the safe haven economy of the West. While Trump chased headlines, Carney chased results. But what came next would blow everyone's minds. On November 4th, Carney's government released its first federal budget. Most people expected standard updates, maybe some infrastructure spending. Instead, Carney unveiled a revolution, a plan to make Canada economically untouchable. The blueprint? Double Canada's non-US exports within a decade, generating $300 billion in new trade. $300 billion! This wasn't tweaking policy. This was cutting the cord with America entirely. For decades, Canada's economy leaned heavily on US markets. 80% of exports went south across the border. Trump's tariff tantrums exposed how dangerous that dependency had become. Carney's solution? Diversify, dominate, and decouple. He outlined deals already in motion with Asia, Europe, and Latin America. Partnerships that would accelerate regardless of Washington's mood. Behind the scenes, officials leaked that Ottawa's investment drive would be the largest infrastructure program in Canadian history. Clean energy, advanced manufacturing, critical minerals, the works. The message couldn't have been clearer. Canada would no longer beg for fair trade. It would create its own. And while America fumed and tweeted, the rest of the world started lining up to join. Which brings us back to Malaysia. When Carney landed in Southeast Asia for the ASEAN Summit, he wasn't there for photo ops. This was the unveiling of a new world order. While Trump's administration pulled out of alliances and insulted allies, Carney arrived with the one thing Asia respects most: stability. He didn't come begging for deals. He came as an equal partner with solutions. In just a few days, Canada sealed agreements that most countries spend years negotiating: AI partnerships with the UAE, a defense and trade pact with the EU, a critical minerals alliance with Germany, agricultural expansion with Mexico. Each deal was a piece of a massive puzzle. But the headline moment? Canada's first bilateral free trade agreement with Indonesia, marking a major step toward a unified Canada-ASEAN economic corridor. Asian media called it a red carpet moment. Leaders from Vietnam and the Philippines publicly praised Canada as a reliable counterbalance to American chaos. Investors in Singapore labeled Ottawa the quiet power rising in the Pacific. In 1 week, Carney accomplished what Trump's entire trade war destroyed: trust. Instead of fear, he inspired partnership. Instead of threats, he offered cooperation. And then came the move that changed everything. Hidden beneath all the diplomatic handshakes was a deal so massive it could redefine global energy flows. On the final day of the summit, Carney met privately with Petronas, Malaysia's state-owned energy giant. Few reporters noticed the quiet meeting, but when the press release dropped hours later, the shockwave was instant. Canada and Malaysia had signed a letter of intent to double LNG production at the Kitimat facility in British Columbia. This would make it the second largest liquefied natural gas project in the world. This wasn't just another deal. This was independence. For decades, Canada's oil and gas exports funneled south to the US, trapped by infrastructure and politics. But now, Carney was opening a direct pipeline to Asia, bypassing Washington entirely. The expansion would create tens of thousands of jobs, inject billions into local economies, and include indigenous communities as shareholders, not spectators. Energy analysts called it a master stroke of timing. As U.S. supply chains crumbled under protectionism, Canada positioned itself as the reliable supplier for the 21st century. Carney's words at the press briefing summed it up perfectly. We want it built, and we want it built faster, to the benefit of Canadians and our partners abroad. Kitimat wasn't just an LNG terminal anymore. It was a symbol. A nation that learned to thrive without permission. While Washington argued over tariffs, Carney quietly turned Canada into Asia's next energy superpower. But his next move rattled Washington even more. When reporters asked if Carney planned to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping at the upcoming APEC summit, everyone expected the usual vague diplomatic answer. Instead, Carney looked straight into the cameras and said, "Yes, there are plans to meet." Then he did something historic. He called China a reliable trading partner. The world stopped. No G7 leader had ever said that, especially not while Washington was screaming about decoupling from China. US media went ballistic. Did Canada just call China reliable? Yes. And Carney knew exactly what he was doing. By redefining reliability, he flipped the entire global narrative. In a world exhausted by Trump's unpredictability, Carney positioned Canada as the bridge between East and West, a neutral power trusted by both sides. Behind closed doors, trade officials whispered about an Asia-Canada corridor, linking ASEAN partners with North American resources through Canadian ports. The geopolitical message was clear. Ottawa was no longer following Washington's playbook. It was writing its own. For Beijing, it was an invitation. For Washington, it was a warning. The balance of power in the Pacific had shifted, and for the first time in decades, the United States wasn't setting the terms. Meanwhile, Doug Ford was waging his own war. His Reagan ad, once dismissed as a provocation, had become one of the most effective political messages in modern history. When Ford appeared on CNN, he didn't back down. Asked if the campaign went too far, he smiled confidently. It had 11.4 billion impressions, the most successful ad in North American history. He reminded viewers that the ad simply replayed Reagan's warning. Tariffs destroy jobs? Then came his knockout line. A tariff on Canada is a tax on America. That sentence exploded across social media, sparking millions of comments from Americans who admitted Ford was right. Each new tariff made groceries, cars, and construction more expensive in the US, not Canada. Ford wasn't being anti-American. He was being pro-reality. Ironically, Ford, once seen as Trump's ally, had just delivered a masterclass in defeating him. His message called for partnership, not submission. And while Ford captivated audiences, Carney was already operationalizing that vision, building a Canada so strong it didn't need to rely on America at all. By the time the ASEAN Summit ended, one truth became impossible to ignore. Canada had changed forever. Nobody expected a simple press conference to blow up like this. But within hours, the shockwaves hit. Carney didn't yell. He didn't even look rattled. And somehow, that made it worse for Trump, because in that moment, everyone watching realized something. America wasn't calling the shots anymore. Carney barely raised his voice above a whisper. But every word landed like a hammer. The message was clear, and the whole world heard it. Canada's done being pushed around. His restraint became his weapon. Every pause, every measured word exposed the gap between maturity and chaos, between leadership and ego. While Trump's administration stumbled through anger, Carney walked away with tangible results. Billion-dollar LNG deals, Asian partnerships, European cooperation, and a long-term vision that outlived any president's mood. Doug Ford's viral ad lit the spark, but Carney's execution turned it into a strategic firestorm. By promising to double non-US exports and invest hundreds of billions at home, Carney wasn't just protecting the economy, he was redefining sovereignty for a new generation. And perhaps the greatest irony? The fatal blow wasn't Carney's words, it was his silence. The refusal to engage in Trump's theatrics became a lesson in power itself. While Trump shouted, Carney built. While the US alienated allies, Canada gained them. The world now knows where steady leadership lives, not in Washington's chaos, but in Ottawa's calm. Because sometimes the strongest leaders don't shout to be heard, they whisper, and the whole world listens. This is the age of Canada's quiet dominance, and it has just begun.